Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Muir, Project Director for Study of the Humanities at the National Humanities Alliance, which, with generous support from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, supports efforts to attract more undergraduates to the humanities. Welcome to our final event in our Strategies for Recruiting Students to the Humanities webinar series. This event will be recorded and made available on our YouTube channel. Note that you can view recordings of earlier events in the series there as well. You can also access them directly through the event page I'll post here in the chat. Today's event, Leveraging Scholarly Society Resources to Enhance Recruitment Efforts, is facilitated by Paula Krebs, Executive Director of the Modern Language Association, who is joined by Amy Ferrer, Executive Director of the American Philosophical Association, Aaryn Green, Assistant Director of Research, Professional Development, and Academic Affairs at the American Sociological Association, Ed Liebow, Executive Director of the American Anthropological Association, and Emily Swafford, Director of Academic and Professional Affairs at the American Historical Association. Thanks very much to all 5 of you for offering your perspectives and resources today, and to all 5 of your organizations for your support as NHA members. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the page to share your questions for our presenters as they arise. Before I pass it over to Paula, I'd like to quickly introduce a brand new report, Strategies for Recruiting Students to the Humanities, Leveraging Scholarly Society Resources, which we launched today. There's the link to the page where you can find that report, as well as our previous reports on undergraduate humanities recruitment. The new report highlights strategies and resources developed by scholarly societies that faculty and administrators can draw on in their efforts to attract more undergraduates to the humanities. The report is grounded in a set of focus groups conducted last summer with scholarly society directors and staff representing 30 organizations that serve to identify the resources they offer that support undergraduate recruitment. A big thanks to all who participated in those conversations. Much like today's conversation, the report illustrates the range of those resources, drawing connections between undergraduate humanities recruitment and the media, events, pedagogical resources, advocacy guides, and professional development opportunities offered by scholarly societies. It is organized into 4 chapters that mirror those in the previous report on campus-based initiatives, articulating career pathways, curricular innovations, fostering disciplinary identity and community, and promoting the discipline to undergraduates and other key audiences. We hope that the report will inspire you and your colleagues to consult and adapt the wealth of tools, strategies, and models offered by scholarly societies across the humanities and humanistic social sciences as you work to attract more students to the humanities. And with that, we'll delve into some of those now. Hand it over to Paula. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Scott, for organizing this, and to the NHA for its support for scholarly societies and the humanities in general in this country. We want to talk today about a particular aspect of the NHA, which is the scholarly societies that make up quite a bit of the NHA itself. You may think of scholarly societies in terms of our publications, our annual conventions, the things you get in the mail from us, and that's a natural association, and much of that is an association with research, with sharing research, and we certainly do stand for that and believe in that and support it. But what you might not know is how much work goes on at a scholarly society to support departments in our fields and to support faculty members in our fields in making sure our fields remain sustainable and powerful and influential and have an impact in higher ed. What we're going to talk about today is ways that all of our societies provide professional development for faculty members to help with recruitment of students, provide opportunities for direct recruitment of students, provide resources for faculty members and others to recruit students, and just provide a wealth of supports around the idea of promoting what our disciplines are and do, because that's the way recruitment happens, is when we can make a clear case for the value of what we represent in language and literature education, in philosophy, in history, sociology, anthropology. We feel that when we make a clear case for what the value is of what we do, students will come to us. But that's not always straightforward, and it's not always easy. And we have a lot of structures in place to help make that happen. And today is about making visible some of those structures that might be hidden to you if you just go to the convention or just read the publications. So today we want to highlight those kinds of resources as we've developed them in our respective societies. I hope I won't give short shrift to the MLA by calling on everybody else. I'll try to remember to get in and talk about some of our resources as well. But I'm going to start just by saying recruiting is a very complex question. It's a complex question for departments and for individual faculty members, for universities, for students themselves. There are lots of factors that go into what makes it convincing to a student to want to either take your courses in your particular discipline or major in your particular discipline. So I want to throw out to the group, for anybody who wants to tackle this right off the bat, what kind of issues do you think you're facing in your discipline or in the humanities in general right now in terms of recruiting? What are the issues that we're facing? Emily, why don't you go ahead and start from the historian's perspective?
Sure, and I think the issues I share will be similar to the ones that we're all facing. So I think the biggest thing that I hear from history faculty about barriers for recruitment is that students either think they already know history and they don't need to study it anymore, or they don't see what the value of studying it is at the collegiate level. They don't know particularly how it's going to lead them to a job. They want to know, if I study history, if I major in history, what sort of jobs am I going to get? And then they also, that's the main barrier, is that they think that studying history or something in the humanities is not useful, and they only want to take it to fulfill a requirement. And if they can fulfill that somewhere else, they might not come to take a history course. So those are some big barriers I see.
I want to pick up on that and actually turn it to Aaryn, for whom it might be a different question, because in fact, while everybody thinks they know what history is, not everybody maybe knows what sociology is. Are you facing different issues then? Oh, you're muted. No. Uh-oh. Let's let Ed address this while Aaryn works out her tech issues, because I think some of the same things apply to anthropology.
Thanks. This is Ed, and I agree that the issues are a little different for anthropology and perhaps parallel in sociology, in that unlike history or political science or some of the other allied fields, it is very unlikely that students will encounter an anthropology class in, say, middle school or high school grades, at least in the US. It's not impossible, but their familiarity with the subject, and we talk to students at the undergraduate colleges and universities who will say, actually, this was the first time I ever encountered this, and it rocked my world. But the exposure and introduction to the concepts may have been there in a history class, in a human biology class, in a world geography class, but it wasn't labeled as anthropology. So familiarity with the concepts and the discipline is another one of our issues. And I would say, along with what Emily had to say about history, there is a perception that if one studies anthropology at the undergraduate level, it's not a job-ready major.
Right.
We have data to contradict that, but having the opportunity to share those data is another story altogether. I don't know, Aaryn, do you have a different story with sociology?
Yeah. Well, we heard you when you first came in, so it's clearly possible. Okay. All right. Well, while Aaron's calling in on her phone, let's turn to Amy. more difficult to come in from high school desire, with the idea that you're going to be a philosophy major? Do you turn students into philosophy majors later?
Yeah, I mean, it's much like Ed was saying with anthropology. People often haven't really even heard of philosophy in high school and in pre-college settings. And so philosophy is often what I've sometimes heard referred to as a discovery major. People have to encounter it. And so if they encounter it early on, then there are great opportunities to bring students in and get them to be majors or minors. But when folks don't have that opportunity through gen ed courses or, because they've got a really specific path that they're working through in their initial years in college, if they come across philosophy as a junior, they're often not going to major in it, even if it's the thing that they really love.
Right.
And so that's a big challenge. And related to the issues that Emily and Ed were talking about, there's also the issue of the outside influences on students' major choice. So, a student may get the data that we can give them about career paths and things that they can do with their major. But if they're facing family pressures, their family don't necessarily understand what the value of philosophy or anthropology or sociology or history is, then that's a real barrier too.
I imagine that's something that shows up in sociology all the time as well, Aaryn. Yeah.
I think you can hear me now, hopefully.
We can.
Okay. Not quite sure what happened. But yes, very similarly to what was mentioned before, what I find interesting about sociology is that while many people don't know what sociology is by definition, once they learn a little bit about the topics that we discuss, everyone thinks they're an expert, right? Because we all occupy these spaces of having a race or a gender or a religion or a family, right? And so it's oftentimes hard to get students to understand that sociology is a social science and that it comes with a history and plethora of literature and scholars in different areas and approaches. And so that is one hurdle, but we also find that you will rarely find anywhere that says we are looking for a sociologist unless you're trying to work at ASA, right? And so really, and like others have said, really trying to get students to understand how they can translate those skills. And it's not that you are learning about a very niche area, that you're actually learning skills that translate into the ability to work in a multitude of spaces. And so really trying to figure out the ways to support faculty, staff, and advisors in getting students to grasp that concept is a hard task.
Now, it's really, what you all are identifying is especially true for students of color, first-generation college students, and Pell Grant recipients. It seems to me that the pressures on those students to choose a major that seems to lead directly to something that will support them after graduation are great. So how are your societies addressing that without kind of talking about your majors strictly in terms of workforce preparation? How do you handle the balance? Let me just start with Emily.
Sure. So Paula, we actually have an initiative, a Mellon-funded initiative called History Gateways, which I'm going to drop into the chat here. Hopefully this will work. And History Gateways is a Mellon-funded equity and access initiative focused on introductory courses in history. So it's not about necessarily pulling people into the major in history. It's about making that introduction to history the best it can be, and that if this is the one course in history that you take at the college level, that you walk away understanding what it is a historian is and what historians do and why history matters to your work life, your civic life, your future, the rest of your college career. But it is an equity and access focused initiative, and it is directly addressing the fact that history is one of a handful of disciplines that at an introductory level, students who are first generation, who are Pell eligible, Black, Latinx, Native American students are disproportionately likely to get a DFWI grade in an introductory history course, which is terrible enough on its own. But the real thing that there's a secondary data point that is even worse, which is if these students get a DFWI in an introductory history course, they are also disproportionately likely to drop out of college entirely. And we know that college is connected to, this is why they're going to college probably, is that it's connected to all of these good economic outcomes, that it's connected to all sorts of very good things in their life. And so we don't want history to be a barrier. We want it to be an access point. We want it to be a gateway, right, to future success in college and in life. And so what History Gateways is doing is we're working with faculty at mostly minority serving institutions at 2-year and 4-year colleges. And we're helping them to, well, they're doing the hard work. They're redesigning their introductory courses with student-centered pedagogy, working closely with institutional research offices to get information about the students in their classes and to see where interventions might help. And they're nearing the end of that process. So we're very excited that we'll soon be able to share these lessons with the larger community of historians. And I think that some of these will be applicable across disciplines as well, especially with the pedagogy and institutional relationships that the faculty are building. So that's the most direct way that we are trying to intervene in certain populations.
All right, that's a really clear equity intervention that's important to highlight. I want to push it into the major a little bit, if I may, and ask whether any of your societies are addressing what the barriers are besides the gateway course barrier, but what are social barriers, family barriers, what are the barriers to wanting to pursue if not a major, then at least, multiple courses in your disciplines. Amy, what does it mean for a working class student to want to be a philosophy major? What are the barriers for them?
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. So again, that kind of career path is often a place where folks get hung up. They, get into that initial course in philosophy and really want to pursue it, but don't see and have trouble explaining to their families the value and the path that they might take. And so one of the things that the APA has done to try to elucidate some of the places where philosophy students can end up going is our Who Studies Philosophy series. So we have, I'll drop a link here in the chat. And so the Who Studies Philosophy series, it's a page on our website that features more than 160 well-known people who have studied philosophy, held degrees in philosophy across 9 different sectors, academia, writing, journalism, arts and entertainment, business, kind of a wide variety, government, wide variety of areas in which people work. And then in addition to that, we have created a poster series that's called the Who Studies Philosophy poster series, where we have 20 different posters featuring people who have degrees in philosophy, most of whom are from underrepresented backgrounds of one kind or another. And the posters are downloadable on our website. They're print ready. We've also sent hard copies of them thanks to a Mellon grant that we have related to diversity institutes, which I can talk about separately. That we've sent out to every program, every institution that teaches undergraduate philosophy courses of one kind or another in the US and Canada. And so they feature those folks along with a quote from an interview or something about the value philosophy has in their lives. And so we really think that helps to demonstrate for folks the many different places that you can go with a philosophy degree and how it can help you in all sorts of different career paths.
Now, I know at the MLA convention, for example, we have a lot of emphasis on professional development and a lot of emphasis on providing chairs and program leaders with the kinds of resources that they need to do recruitment efforts. So we use our convention that way. We also have summer seminars for department chairs and program leaders where a lot of these tools and techniques are shared. And I know that many of you have transformed your conventions as well to include a lot more of this kind of professional development work and support for recruitment. And some of you even have programming for undergraduates themselves at your annual conventions. Who wants to talk about their annual convention a little bit?
I don't mind jumping in there. I think one of the things that ASA has done well is really working to kind of show this hidden curriculum of what it means to be a sociologist or even just a professional in a humanities or social science. And so particularly for undergraduates, we have our honors program, which is very much centered around our annual meeting. And for that, students are able to apply to annual meeting. They get some funding to attend, and they are expected to present their own research at a research roundtable. There's an advisory panel that hosts those roundtables. We talk about their work. We just this year I instituted Conference 101, right, to introduce them to what does it mean to go to a professional conference, to be associated with a disciplinary society, and then they are expected to go and attend the different meetings. We connect them to kind of, big name sociologists to kind of have some of that appeal to get them excited about meeting people whose work that they're reading. And so the honors program has really been a successful way to get students to feel like they belong to the discipline, right? And not that they are just taking a course or reading work. They're actually getting to see what does it mean to be a sociologist, which also introduces them to the various pathways, because at ASA, we have a task force for first gen faculty and students. We also have different focuses on the variety of demographics that make up our membership. And so being able to have undergraduates present at that in a very kind of orderly and systematic way, and that they are built into the annual meeting, has really been a great way to get them excited about it and really see themselves moving further within the discipline.
That's great. We have a question already from the audience, and I'm going to go ahead and read it and see what we can do with it. So Nicholas from Westfield State in history. Hey, Westfield. I have friends at Westfield State. Says he chairs the department and coordinates history education, which is one of those career pathways, certainly education for all of us. But many times students do struggle with making the connection between the discipline and future jobs, despite the fact that most majors don't end up as history teachers. They're starting to collect data on their alums to share with parents and students. And I know a lot of us in our associations collect data and to show the spread of the kinds of jobs our majors get. Amy was talking about that earlier. But what additional resources and ideas are out there besides those that we've talked about already to help parents and prospective students think about career possibilities? NHA obviously has a lot of resources that help us with that. Do any of you at your associations have alumni connections? I've seen a lot of departments do a lot with alumni and highlighting alumni jobs. Ed, what do you got?
This is Ed, and just what you say, Paula, I think it's a great question. Is that what kind of information can we accumulate? And we do indeed, we've collated some promising and best practices that departments do, because they're not always equal in the resources that they apply to tracking their alums. Yes. We find that, for example, there are certain kinds of success stories and pathways that are valorized to a greater extent, especially those who go on to graduate school and to become professors or join the professoriate in anthropology or allied fields. But those who go to work in the tech sector, those who go to work in user experience design, those who go to work in health and patient provider satisfaction and the finance worlds. Those are all really good stories to tell. And while we have data to show the prevalence and the starting salaries that can persuade people that in fact there is a life after college with a degree in anthropology or any of our fields that are represented here, it's the stories that I think have the greatest impact, that convince the mom who's worrying that their kid is going to be sleeping on their basement couch for the rest of their life if they study sociology or history or anthropology or philosophy. We can in fact to tell good stories about that and have compiled those on a website. We also, one of the things we do that I think is a special power of ours, not a department within a college or university campus, but as an association of professionals in the field, we're able to bring together department chairs from all over the place. And so Nicholas, when he asks this question, could join a convening of other department leaders and ask the same question and learn that at Wayne State, they've got this amazing relationship with the high schools in the city of Detroit. At Boise State, they've got a certificate program that you can gain for applying ethnography in the user design field. We have those lights here too. I have to remember to wiggle.
Nothing I can do about it.
Yes. So one of the things that we do that is in addition to the kinds of things that I think all of us do and make those resources available is actually use our convening power to bring department chairs, directors of undergraduate studies together, and together with community college teachers as well, to help make that bridge and to talk about the kind of training that this equips you regardless of the pathway your career takes you.
That's an important function of scholarly societies that we don't talk about enough, is that convening of people to make the change in themselves. I think sometimes members feel like the society is what gives them information or provides them things, when actually the society is the members of the society, and getting the members together to share their ideas and their insights is the most important thing. And the toolkit that Amy has, or that we have, or the what does a history major do pamphlet that the historians do, all of that comes from the members. It's each other that are the most valuable resources for understanding how to recruit students. And we at the societies keep our eyes out for who's doing the good work, where, and how can we disseminate that work, and how can we amplify the great work that our members are doing. I think that's a good bit of what we do. Ed, I hope you see the question in the chat there for you, if you know about these programs, if you weren't just making those up. But
I do. I'm going to provide some links for you. So thanks.
Great. So I want to return to the question of the conventions, because that's the place where we get most of our people together. So in addition to what we've heard about bringing undergraduates to the convention, what other stuff happens at the national gathering that would help faculty members or chairs, departments with the issue of recruiting? What are you seeing go ahead, Emily, what do you guys do?
Sure. I think the convening power that Ed just mentioned that you were talking about is, I think, that's in play at our annual meeting as well. And these conversations happen there, right? Sometimes they're organized by us. Sometimes we put them on the program because we think they're important. But often they just are. Our members put them on the program because they know they're important and they're living it, right? So in the past, we've had pedagogy-focused workshops. We have an assignment charrette that we run that has been pretty popular the last couple of years, and we have luncheons in non-COVID times for department chairs and for directors of graduate study. And there's an increasing chunk of our program that is dedicated to pedagogy and better teaching, but also these questions: how do we communicate that history matters, when there's, especially for history right now, a clamoring for people that we know history matters. How do we communicate the expertise we have, the way we know how to analyze the past and how to connect the past to the present, how to come together around those conversations. And I think that's the biggest thing that happens at the annual meeting, is that people come together and share ideas and say, well, have you tried that? Well, have you thought about this? Well, at my school, this is a resource we have. Well, we don't have that, but we have this. And those conversations, those are the ones where I see people really reluctant to leave the room, right? You know, like they only leave because the other session is coming in and kicking them out. So that's not a like particular thing. It's more of a, I don't know, like an ethos, a feel, a vibe.
And often those events at the convention or some seminars for chairs or things that you do in other spaces end up as resources and toolkits. And so if some of you could talk about some of the online resources that you've prepared for departments, for advocacy, for pedagogy, what kinds of things do you have?
I can jump in here and talk about the Department Advocacy Toolkit, and let me get the link here and I'll drop that in the chat as well. So this is a toolkit that our Committee on the Status and Future of the Profession worked on and was released a few years ago. I think it was 2017, but has continued to be updated and adjusted as things come up. So it's a toolkit that provides strategies that may be useful to programs to kind of shore up their place on campus, to bring in more students, and also when unfortunately this happens, to respond to threats of cuts or closure. Yes. And so this toolkit has dozens of sections. So it's really modular. There are sections on admissions, advising, alumni, career centers, interdisciplinarity, marketing philosophy, parents of prospective students, public engagement, social media, and all sorts of other things. And so because it's so modular, different departments at different kinds of institutions that are situated in different kinds of communities and are facing different issues can pick and choose the tools and strategies that are going to work best for them. While some of the information is philosophy specific, ideas for renaming philosophy courses in ways that might be, might spark more interest to folks who haven't previously been exposed to philosophy, lots of it is really applicable across disciplines. And in fact, the American Historical Association has a toolkit of their own that's inspired on ours. So that's a really useful thing. And connected to that, we created also a Why Study Philosophy flyer that it's a one-page flyer. It's downloadable on our website. It has information about what you might learn in philosophy courses, the kinds of careers that philosophy students go on to have, features a few of those folks from our Who Studies Philosophy series. And so that flyer is print ready and ready to hand out to advising offices, admissions offices, career centers, internship offices. But because it's one page, departments can also create a one-page flyer of their own about their specific program, their degree offerings, their courses that they have, their special programs, and put that on the back, and then it's kind of ready to go. So that's all on our website and has been really useful to departments. Again, not just departments that feel like they're kind of under pressure, but departments that want to grow and do more and continue to build on their success.
Great. Who else wants to jump in? Yeah, Aaryn.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about actually something recent that we've been able to kind of relaunch, which is our Trails online resource library. So Trails stands for Teaching. Now I'm getting tongue-tied, right? Now, Trails stands for Teaching Resource and Innovations Library of Sociology. There it is. And so essentially what this is peer-reviewed teaching resources, whether they be syllabi, assessments, we have kind of films or book reviews. They can be class activities, assignments, and so on a variety of topics. And so this really works similar to an online journal in that you can go on, if you have a subscription or if your department is a department affiliate of ASA, you can go on, type in what topic it is you're looking to teach about, what type of activity, even go by class size or class level, and find a resource that will help you on very specific topics. And so that is really exciting because what it does is it offers a lot of resources and it kind of standardizes some of the way that we're teaching some of these activities, but there's always room and we're always accepting submissions for folks to give us new activities and ideas. And so we've been able to relaunch that and really kind of promote that in a new and different way. Thinking of other resources that we have online, we have our department toolkit, which is for department chairs and department leaders. That includes many of the things that everyone else was just speaking about in terms of kind of these convening ideas and conversations about what it takes to be able to lead your department and to make sociology attractive to undergraduate students. A lot of those ideas come out of our pre-conference that happens a day before the annual meeting, which is a day-long conference of department chairs, as well as our chair link, which is another way, kind of a newsletter that goes out to department chairs, all who are part of the department affiliate program with ASA. So I really think that one of the things that we find for our online resources is that they're continuing to grow. I think the pandemic forced us to shift to thinking more about not just what resources we offer in conjunction with the annual meeting, but what are we offering throughout the year? And also kind of what is it that needs to change, right? Because we have a lot of these things that existed already, but thinking about new ways to either talk about them or make them accessible to folks has really been new. And so Trails has really been a great new asset, and I'll drop a link for that as well.
Great. The MLA, or go ahead, Ed.
No, go ahead, Paula.
Okay, I was just going to say at the MLA, we have long had a strength in working with department chairs. We have these sub-organizations of the Association of Departments of English and the Association of Departments of Foreign Languages, but we find that that's no longer enough for our membership, that we're not so easily categorized anymore into departments of English and departments of foreign languages. There are lots of other programs that are neither fish nor fowl, that are departments of language that include English. There are cultural studies programs and performance studies programs, and all of which include humanists who are natural members of the MLA. And so we're expanding our professional development offerings beyond just targeting language chairs and English chairs. We're kind of rebranding into MAPS, MLA Academic Program Services, so that we can reach more program leaders, but faculty members, more faculty members in general in those areas. But we really do have a long history of putting chairs together in the summertime at summer seminars, getting them together for 2.5 intensive days of sharing these kinds of strategies and resources. I do want to say that one of the big things I think we're facing in terms of recruitment, though, that I think language and literature departments have not paid as much attention to as we should, is the idea that for students to want to major in our fields, we have to have a public presence and a kind of a respect in the culture in general for what we are and do that has been a bit of a problem lately. And I wanted to ask you all, and I know I'm derailing where Ed was going, but you will circle back to that, I guess, to say that part of being able to recruit new students for our field is to increase our public presence and talk more publicly about the value of what we represent and what study of our fields allows people to do, especially in the case of the MLA in terms of information literacy, for example. But I wonder if any of you want to talk about the public presence of your fields. Ed, go ahead.
In fact, that's exactly what I was going to talk about. And the pandemic forced us to go online, but we've had a public education initiative in the Anthropology Association, which I think is replicable in a number of disciplinary societies, or even more widely for the humanities. That is a traveling exhibition program that started with an exhibition on race called "Race, Are We So Different?", which focused on human biological variation and its cultural constructions. And this is an exhibit that has been seen over the last 13 years in more than 45 different museum settings around the country. It's got long-term homes now in San Diego, the Twin Cities, and the Raleigh-Durham area. And at our website, there's a virtual version of this exhibition at understandingrace.org. And we are launching this summer a second one that has to do with migration called World on the Move, 250,000 years of human migration, that has a similar sort of narrative construction to it. What do we understand? What do we know? And what's our changing basis of knowledge about human population movements? What is the history of the use and abuse of this knowledge, principally for exclusionary purposes, and then what is the lived experience of people and communities on the move. And it is our not too transparent effort to say these are timely and timeless topics that should be in the public conversation. We have an opportunity to help shape the public conversation. And by the way, it's brought to you by the humanities and social sciences. And so this second exhibit on migration is actually going to be toured by the American Library Association, one of the ACLS NHA sister societies, through their Office of Public Programs, and it's going to go to public libraries around the country for the next several years.
We have a couple of questions coming in from the audience. The first one I'm seeing here, it says, do we have success stories in enrollments in humanities programs? Do we know how they did it? And I would say that all of us have ones that we can point to in our own disciplines. The NHA has assembled them in its publications, and I would just go right to the Study the Humanities for those success stories that they have highlighted. And these two reports, the last report, this report, and the previous report from the membership in general, have very clear success stories. We personally, for the MLA, you could look at the every 4 years or so, we do a language enrollment survey. Our last language enrollment survey, which came out 2 years ago, shows what language programs are growing and what are shrinking across the country, but has a plethora of examples of successful language recruitment programs in relation to it as well. All of our societies collect these kinds of examples of successes, and certainly share them. We do at our chair seminars with other chairs. I would say get involved in the resources of your professional association, but start with the NHA as well. Does anybody else want to point to places where people can go for specifics, or are we okay to move to the next question? Okay. Next question we have is, are there opportunities for societies and associations to partner with public library branches through the American Library Association or state humanities councils, rather than secondary and rather than high schools and community colleges, for example, maybe fostering a broad base by getting it directly to the communities rather than trying to work through the high schools might be more legible as a recruiting pathway. And I think that really reflects what Ed's been saying about public presence for what it is we do. And I know many of our members are working with state humanities councils grants, or working with public libraries. I know Emily's folks work with public history. Did you want to talk about anything like that, Emily? Or
we don't partner directly a lot with public history organizations, although people who are public historians are members of the AHA and also the National Council on Public History. We work really closely with them. So I think that this question is really appropriate, that this is exactly how we through our members, right? It's usually not directly us, can directly connect with communities, and we can support them in a variety of ways. So for example, the AHA has a website. We like to say everything has a history, and we have a webpage on our website that rounds up some resources connecting what's happening in the present to the past. So for example, we put together a bibliography of what historians wrote in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, because pandemics have a history, right? And everything that happened in 2020 has a history. So that we created a roundup of that. So those, and we also created a rapid response to the Capitol insurrection on January 6th, how to teach the history of presidential transitions of power and racist violence. And so those sorts of things we can do. So it's not, I love the idea of partnering directly, but often we're providing the resources that enable those partnerships out in the community.
There's a question here about smaller societies which might not have the resources of some of these bigger societies to do this kind of work. And the question is, what can the smaller societies do, or members of the smaller societies do, if they're to engage with this issue and help department chairs? And I think that's a really legit question. And I think some of us in the larger societies can do some outreach to the smaller societies and offer some of our templates, and some of our models for what we do to those societies. But I mean, smaller societies leverage their members the same way we do, and disseminate, great practices that their members do, push them out on websites, collect teaching resources the same way that the larger societies do, and also feature them at their annual gatherings. And more of us, as Aaryn was pointing out earlier, are realizing that professional development can happen year-round now, and that there are many ways that we can provide through this platform opportunities to interact with members and have members share best practices with each other. Okay, there was another question.
I'd also add to that it's been my experience, especially thinking of our regional sociological conferences, societies, that those are the places where people go to first, right? They're more accessible, they're less expensive, and oftentimes that is where people kind of, especially if we're thinking of graduate students or undergraduate students, they get their feet wet there, and they begin to get comfortable with the idea of partnering with or belonging to an association. And so for ASA, we oftentimes try to make sure there is some ASA presence at the regional or smaller society meetings. And I think that what we find there is that there's a very strong sense of belonging. And even if someone joins ASA, they're still very tied to their regional association. And so I think there is there's a gift there that smaller associations have, that regional associations have, that we actually are trying to, tap into and understand. How do we get that same feeling and sense of belonging for those who are members of the National Association?
I think that's super important. And we're finding that at the MLA, for example, we're starting to invest a lot more in regional activities, because that's where the connections stay permanent. Our annual convention, people come together with their friends from graduate school once a year at that event, but that's not the same thing as knowing who's around the corner from you doing good work that you want to interact with. When I was a dean, I did a lot of regional work, and it seemed it just seemed so productive to bring people together who could drive to each other's campuses and do that work. And I think you're right that that's a disadvantage that the big umbrella groups have, unless they have really active regional components of them, which some of us do. And I know that Amy does, and that when you have divisions that are regional, they can work together a lot better. We have an initiative at the moment that's obliquely a recruitment initiative that trains PhD students in conjunction with community college faculty members. They work together in regional institutes on reading and writing pedagogy and the overlap. And that's with an eye to strengthening that kind of pedagogy in access-oriented institutions, hopefully to encourage students to move into more advanced courses in reading and writing, and find their path to the humanities that way. And that's our first foray into kind of regional work. And we're finding it a really powerful way to interact with our members and have our members interact with each other. There's a really interesting question here that I want to ask you guys to address. Kyoko Amano says, in the post-COVID world, I believe the humanities have a chance to be in the forefront. Scientists have done their job in creating the vaccine. Now it's our turn to demonstrate the long-term social effect of the pandemic through humanistic research like history, literature, etc. My question is, how do we identify the Fauci of the humanities who will eloquently speak about us? Who here wants to volunteer to be the Fauci of the humanities? See, the problem is, of course, that we're complex thinkers in the humanities, and we know it's not that simple, right? That we find the one person to tell the story for us. But how do we make clear the value of the humanities in processing this is a super important question. And we all know how important the arts and the humanities were through the lockdown phase of the pandemic, where book groups and poetry groups and music and all kinds of things on the web became absolutely essential to people's way of coping with the pandemic. We saw how important the humanities was. We see how important the humanities is for evaluating the ethics of decisions that are being made and for information literacy in relation to what's coming up. But what would be the symbol of that, or who, what text, what activity, what person? That's another question. Anybody have any ideas about that?
I don't have an idea about a single unifying symbol, Paula. I think you're right. As humanists, we react to that sort of a knee-jerk. Let's stop and think. But I think what I hear in that is less a unifying, person maybe, but more a need to have something to organize around the value of what we study and how it matters in our lives and our students' lives, in the lives of people who weren't majors. So an example of something that the AHA is doing in the wake of all of this legislation that's coming up about roughly around divisive concepts, about trying to chill what people are able to teach in mostly K-12 classrooms, but sometimes in higher ed. We actually just launched today a website that we're calling Teaching History with Integrity, that is sort of trying to be a place that people can go to find resources around this. So we're part of a Learn from History coalition, which is us and the Organization of American Historians and some other organizations creating toolkits on how to react if this is happening in your own state, some other initiatives that we have underway. So I think that sort of work is in the mission of what scholarly societies do. And so, yes, there's not a Dr. Fauci who is a meme has every right to be a meme, right? And to sort of have internet fame. But that sort of work, I think we can and are doing, and we rely on our members to know what to do, right? They tell us, help us do this, and it often does come from a threat. We're being attacked, our department's being, is being threatened with dissolution, or faculty members are losing their jobs, but also come to us before, so we respond in that, but we get the ideas from our members and try to be out in front as well.
And people are pointing out that Fauci himself was a humanities major as an undergraduate and has spoken quite eloquently about the value of the humanities and how important it is. And we look at the work of Rita Charon, at Columbia in narrative medicine, and the absolute overlaps between being a good clinician and being able to listen and to hear narratives and analyze narratives. It's absolutely clear to those of us who value these things. Go ahead, Ed.
It occurs to me that the power of storytelling that comes from the performing arts may be an ally for us here. And I'm thinking just in the narrow sense that one of the great recruiting weapons that anthropology has had at its disposal for a number of years now are these popular television shows that have forensic crime solving associated with them, and kids and families that grow up watching this and saying, yeah, that seems really cool, I'd like to go study that. And while that may not be everybody's cup of tea, what it demonstrates to me is that a compelling story well told through the performing arts can have a really powerful impact, and it can move people to think about the world around them and look at it in very different ways. And it may be that we ought to be tapping into our performance studies folks and screenwriters and the theatrical directors looking for these characters that we can all identify with, instead of some of the goofy ways that sociologists and historians or anthropologists may be portrayed in movies, theater, television today.
Yeah, let's not talk about English department chairs.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but The Good Place has been a really exciting thing for philosophy, and
yes.
The creator of The Good Place just released a book just in the last couple of weeks about trying to make ethical theory and ways to live ethically more understandable to people in the general public. So yeah, I think that's absolutely right on it.
Amy, I have that book on hold at my local library. So there you go.
Me too.
And I have the streetcar episode, unfortunately, indelibly in my brain.
Yes, the trolley problem is now a meme. So,
Really,
there you go.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we just have well, we have 5 minutes left, so we could take another question or two. But I want to ask each of you, what are some initiatives that your societies are doing that we haven't had a chance to mention yet that you want to make sure you talk about? So what do you got, Aaryn?
We have a couple of things that I'm really excited about. One is called our Expert Spotlight program, where we have somewhat like a speed dating program, right? Where we have reached out to our high school instructor members of ASA and kind of set up a matching system where they can request a sociologist to come speak to their high school classroom virtually or in person if we are able to find someone in the area. And so what that does is allow sociologists to talk to high school students and really kind of talk about a range of things. Folks can ask or request that they talk about actual content, whether it's race, class, or gender, or just talk about what is a sociologist, what does it mean to do sociology, what is a day like in the life of a sociologist, right? And so that's been well received. We haven't got a lot of feedback on how it has gone so far, because we essentially just kind of do the matching and allow people to work out their schedules on their own accord. But we feel like that's a really good touch point for high school students to see and hear sociologists early on and see what it might be like to kind of follow that pathway. So there's that program that we're excited about. We've also been able to do our virtual ProSim, which is targeted toward graduate students and early career folks. So every third Thursday of the month, we host a Zoom meeting that is meant to be, we don't record it because we want people to be able to talk about whatever it is. So whatever professional development topics that we got from our survey, be it, how to publish, how to work, how to write a book proposal, what is it like to make a teaching philosophy, all of these different things that folks might need, graduate students in particular, we're able to kind of have really comfortable conversations around that and bring in different speakers for that series. So that's been really well received. I believe that is an initiative that started right after the pandemic, and it's something that we're going to continue moving forward. So
Great.
What we find is that has been, really creating these spaces where we can have conversations and look at the hidden curriculum behind our discipline is really what's well received and really gives us a lot of programming to offer and support to offer our members.
Got 2 minutes left, so give me 30 seconds each of you. What did we not get to? Amy.
So one of the things I mentioned earlier is the Undergraduate Philosophy Diversity Institutes, and I'll put a link in the chat. These institutes are independently hosted, and the APA has provided support through grants over the years. Since 2015, we've had funding from the Mellon Foundation to provide operational support to some of the institutes, but also to create ways to help the alumni continue. And these are basically summer programs of about a week for students from underrepresented backgrounds who get a chance to kind of preview what grad school in philosophy is going to be like and get advice on how to succeed in grad school. They've been really successful in helping those who do become majors continue in philosophy and get a sense of whether they're ready to do it. I won't say much about it, but we also in the pandemic created a webinar series called APA Live, and we've had a number of webinars that are related to issues connected with recruiting, department chairs, all sorts of different things that have been of interest over the last 2+ years.
Excellent. Ed, your turn.
We're doing summer teachers workshop for high school teachers to develop course modules that they can bring back to their classrooms in the presence of professional anthropologists. That's one thing I didn't mention.
That's great. Emily, your last word.
The only thing I want to mention is our tuning initiative, which was bringing faculty together to articulate what a history major knows, understands, and is able to do. And it's really the project that launched all of the teaching and learning work that the AHA does now, and it's still something to return to when we want to communicate the value of the discipline.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. This has been a really rich conversation. I encourage everybody in the audience to get in touch with your professional association, find out what resources they have. Go ahead and email the executive directors. They're happy to get back to you. I could speak for us all. Scott, you want to wrap up anything?
No, that was fantastic. Thanks so much for the wonderful conversation and everyone's contributions to it. And for all of you for being here. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye now. Thank you.